Today's daf, Be'ezras Hashem, is Masechta Menachos Daf Mem Gimel, and we will start from 5 lines from the bottom of Mem Beis and Mid Beis. So here we go. Tana Rabbanim. The rabbis taught Tcheles Ein Lo Bedika. In other words, that the Tcheles, to buy a pair of tzitzis, there's no way to check if it's the person is selling you real techeles or he's selling you a fake imitation called kela ilan. So therefore, when you buy tzitzis in the time when you're buying with techeles, therefore make sure you buy from a trusted person, since you can't really know if it's true or not. So make sure you buy it from an erlich yid. Tefillin yesh lem bedika. A tefillin you could check, because you can open up the tefillin and check the parshias to see if the words are written correctly. But still, but you should only buy tefillin from an expert, from a reliable person, because there's one part of tefillin no matter how much you check, you can't know if it's true, because we need that the parchment that the tefillin is made has to be made lishma. Had to be made l'shem the mitzvah of tefillin, and that you can't check by just opening up a pair of tefillin. You don't know how the parchment was made. But svarim umezuzah is a regular chumash, so to speak, or a mezuzah, yesh lem bidika. You could check to see if it's written correctly. Adam, it can be purchased from anybody, because a mezuzah does not have to have that the parchment should be made lishma. And therefore, you just check to see if it's written correctly and it's spelled correctly, and you can buy it from anybody. And as Rash Taisus unusually brings from the Chaim Pirish or Moshe ben Maimon. So here Taisus is quoting the Rambam, the mezuzah lo yibay l'shma. The mezuzah, you don't need that, it has to be, the leather has to be made l'shma. So, says the Gemara, question, uschelis eila bedika. What does that mean? Tchelis, you can't check if it's the real thing. If someone will sell you a blue tzitzis, you can't check if it's a real blue from the chilazayin, from that snail, or not. What do you mean you can't check? I'll give you the ingredients, the chemicals to check. Rav Yitzchak braid Rav Yehuda badekle. Rav Yitzchak gave us simonim on how to check if you're being sold the real thing. Maisi magavia gila, you bring alum. Umaya shavlilsa, and you bring fenugreek sap. Okay, so alum and fenugreek sap. Umeime raglaim, you bring urine of a ben arbaim yoim. You take the urine of a baby. I don't know what's chemically active in that. And so what are you going to do? Mix it all together. V'tarale begavai, and you dip the tchelis, you dip the wool into the tzitzis, into that mixture. Mu'urti v'atzafra, overnight. Iparit chazuse, if the look gets faded a little bit, then psula, then you know it's fake tchelis. Lo iparit chazuse, but if the tchelis is not, if the color does not fade, then you know it's the real thing, then it's keshera. And then that's what test number one. Rav Ada gave another test to see if it's real techeles or not. Maybe see, you bring chamira arkasa, the sare, you bring the hard yeast of barley, and and you bake it together with the wool. Ishtani limal Yusuf, it gets more like bluish kishera. Ligriusa, if it changes color downwards, then you know it's the fake stuff. Psula. The simonech shini shakar shinu emes. The simina is, if it changes to the worst, then you know it's fake stuff. If it changes to the better, then it's true. So here the Gemara provided two tests that you can do at home to see It's like mold test that they sell in the stores. You could do a test. You bought a pair of chelis. You want to know if it's true. So you can do a test at home to see if it's chelis. So why did the Brisa say, oh, there's no way to test chelis? And says the Gemara, my ein lo bedika, what did we mean that you can't test it out? Nami de koma atiima. Atiima, you can't say that it was dyed l'shem tchelis. In other words, you don't know the rabbi who dyed it, the person that manufactured it, dyed it l'shem to mitzvah tzitzis, or Stami was just doing it to test it out to see if the color will attach itself to wool. So since it's you don't know if he did it lishma, that's what we mean you can't test it. Sure, you can test it to see if it's real tchelis or not, but you can't test it if the manufacturer did it lishma. Says the Gemara, Mar Mashche, this Talmud Chacham Mar, and he lived in a place called Mashche. Aisit chelte b'shnei Rav Achai. He bought chelis in the years of Rav Achai. Rav Achai was getting older, and during those years, Rav Achai was the old sage, and this Mar bought a pair of chelis. And at that time already, chelis was almost lost. It was about that time that chelis somehow disappeared from Klal Yisrael. So he checked it out. He bought it on the street, and Batku b'd Rav Yitzchak Rav Yehuda, he used Rav Yitzchak Rav Yehuda's test, the parad chazuse, and the color faded. So it showed, based on that test, that it's not chelis. But then he used Rav Ada's test, v'ishtan l'mal yuseh, and it got better. So so he said this is a possible test because it failed one test, although it passed the other test, so it may not be real tchelis. Rav Achai explained to him, so you're not going to call it real tchelis, but you can't call it fake tchelis because it really passed the test. So sometimes in situations, and especially in medical tests, there's something called a false negative. So you have two tests over here. So it received a false negative on the first test. So this is what really you have two tests over here. When they taught the tests of Tchelis, they gave you two tests. So if you used the first test and it didn't fade, so it passed the first test, then Kshera, it's Tchelis. Even if it failed the first test and it lost some of its color, then you could use the second test. So you use the second test with the yeast from a hard yeast from barley, and ishtani l'mal yusa, if it goes better, if it changes into a more bluish color, even if it failed the first test, kasher, it's kosher. The griyusa, so if it went worse, then it failed both tests, psula, it's possible. Says the Gemara, and that's what they sent from over there, I guess from Eretz Yisrael, that not that these two tests are independent of each other. They're dependent of each other. If you pass the first test, you don't need to make the second test. If the Techelis fails the first test, you could do the second test. And if it fails that, then it's no good. But if it passes the second test, it could be good. Says the Gemara, Rabboni, here's a good Rabboni, Dayek v'zovin kechumra masnisa. Rabboni spent a lot of money on his tzitzis because he only wanted to buy it from an expert, and I guess where he lived, he couldn't find an expert, and then somebody he trusted till he found somebody he trusted and bought a pair of tzitzis. So you would think that if you spend so much money on your tzitzis, you're going to lose, you lose some of your income. Amalei Usaba, so Eliyahu Navi told him, Hachi Avid Kamoy de Kamoch. This is the way the earlier tzaddikim used to do. Va'atzlach iskayu, and they were very successful in business. So just because it cost you extra money to find really kosher tzitzis that you can trust, don't worry about your business. The Kadosh Baruch Hu will make it up to you. Tana Rabbanim, Halakeach talis mitzuyatzis minashuk miyisrael. If someone buys a talis that has tzitzis on it from the street, from a regular Jew, and you don't know this Jew, you can assume that the Yid is selling you a kosher pair of tzitzis. Min hagoy, but if you're buying tzitzis from a goy, it depends. Min hatagor, if it's a guy who owns a shop, so he's not going to sell you the fake tzitzis because he doesn't want to ruin his name. So it's kshera. So we'll assume that the tzitzis is kosher, and the guy bought it from another Yid. Min hahedyet, but if you're buying it from a personal collector, private collector of a guy, so then Pesula, you can assume that tzitzis that he sells you is pasul, because he's just selling it a one-time sale. Now, even though the merchant of a goy is carrying tzitzis, you're going to ask it, how could he carry tzitzis? We know a rule that a person cannot sell tzitzis, a real tzitzis garment, to a goy until you take off the strings. That was a rule. And therefore, we could assume, how did this merchant get a hold of this merchandise? He must have bought it, despite that people know the halacha that they're not supposed to sell it to him. He bought it from Yidden who are selling it to him. So you could really rebuy it from the guy and assume that it's kosher as long as the guy is a merchant. Now, the Gemara is just going to catch up. Why isn't a regular Yid allowed to sell its tzitzis to a goy? Here's a quick question. Why can't I sell my tzitzis to a goy? So the Gemara says, my tama. So the Gemara says an interesting thing. Rashi says that we are afraid that this guy has a mistress, a Jewish lady who's his mistress, and he's mazana with her. Now, this mistress, this Jewish lady, thinks that this guy is a Yid because he's carrying a pair of tzitzis. And therefore, she's going to have znus with a guy, and she's over loisischatenba. Very interesting. So because of that lady, we never allow goyim to carry Jewish garments, distinctive Jewish garments. Rabbi Yehuda says the reason why we don't sell Jewish garments to goyim, tzitzis especially, maybe a guy will accompany a Jew on the street and then kill him because the Yid is not going to be careful and thinking that the person that he's sharing an Uber ride with is a Yid because he's wearing tzitzis, but really he's a guy, and this guy might kill him. So therefore, we never sell tzitzis garments to a guy. Therefore, you cut the tzitzis garment, you cut the strings off. Says the Gemara. Now, what about women wearing tzitzis? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda, Ramei Techilta, Rabbi Yehuda would put on tzitzis, liperzume. Perzume is a type of hair. You see this type of garment. You see, they're wearing this little garment on this ancient vase, and that's called a perzume. He put tzitzis on his wife's, on the girls that lived in his house, their garments, he put tzitzis on them. So apparently he held that women are supposed to put on tzitzis. Another thing Rabbi Yehuda did, Mavarach called Safra Lisate B'tzitzis. Every morning he made a bracha Lisate B'tzitzis. So the Gemara asks the question, in the Rami, since he put on tzitzis to his wife's begodim kasavar, that women are chayiv in tzitzis because it's not a time-bound mitzvah. So a woman should be chayiv in tzitzis. If that's the case, Amay Mevarach called Safra v'Tzafra, why was he making the bracha every morning to put on tzitzis if it's a mitzvah that's supposed to be done constantly, even during the daytime and at nighttime? Answers the Gemara, Kid Rebbe, because Rabbi Yehuda held like Rebbe. Tanya, we learned in a brisa, tefillin calls man shemanicham, mevarach aleim, divrei Rebbe. As long as you're putting on the tefillin, you make a bracha on them, divrei Rebbe. So you can make a bracha every time. So that's why he made a bracha every morning. So the Gemara says, then every day, every hour, let him make a bracha on his tzitzis. Why did he do it in the morning? Answers the Gemara, Rav Yehuda irish tzniya hava. Rav Yehuda was a modest man. He never took off his clothing or his tzitzis the entire day, his cloak. So the Gemara says, then why did he make a bracha in the morning. Presumably, he slept with the cloak. And says the Gemara, when he changed to his pajamas, to his regular suit, so he made a new bracha with tzitzis. He probably held, Rabbi Yehuda, that even your pajamas need tzitzis. So when he changed into his pajamas, he made a bracha, and then when he probably got up in the morning and changed into his regular suit, he also wore tzitzis, and he made a new bracha. Nevertheless, Rabbi Yehuda is of this interesting opinion that tzitzis is something, a mitzvah essay, that's not time dependent, and therefore women are mechayiv. Tana Rabbanan, it's actually a machlokes tanoim. Kakoil chayavim betzitzis. Every Jew is chayiv in tzitzis. Kahanim, Leviim, Yisraelim, Gerim, Noshim, va'avodim. Even a woman is chayiv in tzitzis. Rab Shimon paita ben Noshim. Rab Shimon, it says it's women are exempt. Mipnei shemitzvah asay shaz maram garma. So mitzvah say that's Mount Garma, women are potter. They could put it on, maybe they don't have to make a bracha, maybe they do, but they're really exempt from wearing tzitzis. That's the opinion of Rab Shimon. Amamar, so we learned the opinion of Tanakama, Hakol chayavim b'tzitzis, Kehanim, Leviim, Yisrael. Every is chayav to wear a pair of tzitzis. Pshita, the Kahana, Leviim, Yisrael, Peture, man lechayev. If a Kohen, Levi, Yisrael are exempt from tzitzis, who's going to wear the tzitzis? Why does the Bryce have to say, everybody has to put on a pair of tzitzis, a Kohen, Levi, Yisrael? Of course, Hakol includes Kohen, Levi, and Yisrael. And says the Gemara, I would have thought that a Kohen is exempt from tzitzis, because a Kohen, tzitzis has this unique din that shatnez, that tzitzis override shatnez. But I would think that the mitzvah of shatnez does not apply by Kahanim, because Kahanim wore shatnez on their clothing that they wore in the Beis Hamikdash. So maybe they don't have a wearing a tzitzis, because Sal Kadai Kamina, I would have thought Ksiv lo silba shatnez shemen pishtim yaktam yedilim taslcha mandalay ishterei klayim. A regular Jew, he's not permitted to wear klayim legabe belavisha udem chayim b'tzitzis. Therefore, he is obligated to wear tzitzis. Hari kahanim, but a regular kohen, hoil the ishti kalayim legabeyu, since kalayim is permitted by them in the big day kahuna, kahanim wore shatnez. Loy lechayva, I might think they're not obligated in mitzvah tzitzis. Kamash malam, they are, because kahanim are not just free from the mitzvah shatnez. Need the ishtrei beidin avoida. A kohen is not allowed to wear shatnez while he's doing the service in the Beis Hamikdash. But when he's off duty, he's not permitted to wear shatnez, and therefore he's also obligated in the mitzvah tzitzis. Rab Shimon paita ben Noshim. Rab Shimon says a woman is exempt. Why? Because it's a mitzvah asay shazman garma. My time Rab Shimon. Where do you see it's a mitzvah asay shazman garma? The time you learn to the brisa, Risa Moshe, you have to see it. So pashtus, you have to be able to see the tzitzis during the daytime. Prat, it excludes l'ksus laila, a clothing that's dedicated to be used only at night is exempt from tzitzis. So we see that tzitzis is a time-bound mitzvah, and that's why Reb Shimon holds women are exempt. Maybe the pasuk is exempting the clothing of a blind person because he can't see his clothing from tzitzis. And says the Gemara, the Torah tells you that you would put tzitzis on any garment that you cover yourself with. That includes a blind person's clothing. It says that a blind person is chayiv in tzitzis. What do I use the reason to exempt a ksus laila? You have one pasuk that's an exemption, one pasuk that's an inclusion. Why do we include the clothing of a blind person and exclude the clothing of pajamas of the nighttime? And says the Gemara, Marbani Susuma Shiashna B'Riya Eitzel. A blind person's clothing can be seen by other people, so therefore it's included in the mitzvah of tzitzis. I will exclude Ksus Laila, a garment that's dedicated for only at night. Nobody can see it because if it's only used at night, at nighttime there's no light, so therefore it's exempt from the mitzvah tzitzis. As the Gemara of Rabbanan, Hi, Ashet Chasaba, my Avdilay. What do they use with Ashet Chasaba? They don't need it to be marba a ksus of a blind person because even a ksus laila is chayiv. The boy they needed to teach you another thing. Al arba kanfois ksuscha arba v'loy shalosh, that only a garment that has 4 corners, not 3 corners, is obligated to the mitzvah of tzitzis. Maybe only a garment, maybe the pasuk is telling you a garment of 4 corners, but not a garment of 5 corners. When it says a garment that you cover yourself with, it means that even if the garment happens to have 5 corners, you're obligated in tzitzis. So when does the Torah require only 4? When it's 4 but not 3. So the halacha is 3. If it's a 3-cornered garment, it's exempt. It's a 5-cornered garment, it's obligated. Says the Gemara, why should I include a 5-cornered garment and exclude a 3-cornered garment? And says the Gemara, I'll include a 5-cornered garment, because every 5 has the number 4 in it. But I'll exclude a 3-cornered garment from the mitzvah of tzitzis, because a 3-cornered garment is not 4, and the Torah requires the minimum of 4. Rab Shimon, ma'ashenafka. Rabbanan asheloi mashmalu. Rab Shimon will know that idea from the extra word asher, and Rabbanan don't have that word. They don't darshan the word asher. Now the Gemara goes back. Rabbanan. This is a good question. Rabbanan hold that the mitzvah of tzitzis is daytime, nighttime, doesn't matter. And the Torah tells you have to see it. Doesn't that imply that it implies only during the daytime? So, but the Rabbanan don't agree with that idea. So what did they do with Re'isa Moisei? You have to see the tzitzis. And says the Gemara, they needed to teach you another idea. The Torah tells you got to see the mitzvah and remember something. So the Torah is telling you, Re'ei mitzvah zu, you'll observe the mitzvah of tzitzis, you'll uzchar mitzvah acheres, and remind yourself to do another mitzvah, hatluya boy. Ve'eza zu krishma. Krishma, the same time that you can see the tzitzis and obligated to put on tzitzis, that's the time that you can read the krishma. It's now we learned in the Mishnah, when you can tell the strings of your tzitzis apart, that is the time that you could put on your tzitzis, and that reminds you that's the time where you could begin saying the Kriya Shema. Utanya idach, we learned in another brisa. You see the tzitzis and you'll remember. You'll see this mitzvah and you'll remind yourself, hey, there's a nuts of mitzvah. The ezazu, zu mitzvahs kalayim, the ksiv, like silva shatnus, sema pishta yachtam, dilim tas l'chab. When you're going to look at your tzitzis, you're going to remind yourself, hey, I have an exemption over here that I can wear shatnus, but everywhere else, I can't wear shatnus. So re'isa moiseh, when you see it, you'll remind yourself, hey, there's an isser to wear shatnus everywhere else. Tanya idach, there's another drasha from Re'isa Moisei's Chakt, and you'll see the mitzvah and you remember as kol mitzvahs Hashem. That means, as soon as you get up in the morning and you can do the mitzvah, because this brisa goes according to Reb Shimon, that mitzvah tzitzis is only when you can see it. So then, it's chayav b'chol mitzvahs kul, and then you're obligated in all other mitzvahs that are time dependent. Rab Shimon in this brisa goes according to Rab Shimon, the Dama mitzvah asay shesman grama, that tzitzis is a mitzvah asay shesman grama. Then the brisa Tanya idach, we have another brisa. Re'isim oisus chaz mitzvah Hashem. You'll see the tzitzis and you remind every mitzvah. Shkula mitzvah zu kinega kol ha-mitzvahs kulam. Something about the mitzvah tzitzis that corresponds to all the mitzvahs. When you look at your tzitzis, it just somehow has all mitzvahs coming together in that garment. Rashi explains in the Chumash that it's because the strings are 8, the tzitzis of gematria 600, the strings are 8, and there are 5 knots, so you get 613. Tanya idach, we learned in a brisa. You see the tzitzis, and you'll remember, and you'll do. It'll activate your mind. When you see something that puts a signal into your head to remind yourself to do things. And zechira, when you're reminded, will bring you to do the mitzvahs. Rab Shimon ben Yochai Omer. Rab Shimon ben Yochai says, "Kol hazaras b'mitzvazu." Anybody who's diligent in this mitzvah is mekayim the mitzvah on the best in the best way possible. Zoichel, he will merit umekabel pnei shchina. He will receive the divine presence, not only in the next world, probably in this world too. Ksiv Hacha, it says over here, you see the tzitzis. Ksiv Hasam, as Hashem Lekechatiro, Oisei Savoid. So therefore, the mitzvah of tzitzis is a look type of mitzvahs that if you mekayim this mitzvah, you will be zeicha to face the Eibishter. Come the Tarabbanim, another minute, and then we'll stop. Chavivin Yisrael Shesibaban Hakadosh Baruch Hu b'mitzvahs tefillin. The Jewish people are so special that Kadosh Baruch Hu surrounded them with the mitzvah of tefillin b'rasheim, the mitzvah of tefillin on their head. That's one mitzvah. Tefillin b'zrayaseyim and tefillin on their arm. That's a second mitzvah. B'tzitzis b'bigdayim, and 4 mitzvahs of tzitzis on their clothing. That's total. That's 6. The umezuzah lefischem and a mezuzah for their door. Through these 7 mitzvahs, I'm able to give HaKadosh Baruch Hu praises on your Torah, on the Mishpat Teitzekecha, on your righteous justice. David when David went into a bathhouse, and he saw Atzmei Oren, he saw himself without clothing. Omer, he said to himself, I'm standing naked, I don't have any mitzvahs. The Kevan Sheniskam B'Mila, when he looked there and saw that he had a bris milah, his mind got cooled, because a bris milah is not only a mitzvah that you do when you're 8 days old, but it's a mitzvah that you mekayim every day by staying gemalit, having that bris. So David, when David left the bathhouse, he thanked HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And finally, we're going to end with here. You see, so you have to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for these mitzvahs. Rabbi Yelezer ben Yaakov Omer, if you have the tefillin in your head, that means you're conscious that you're wearing tefillin on your head. And you have in your conscience about that you're wearing tefillin on your arm. And you pay attention that you're wearing tzitzis in your clothing, by your clothing. And you have a conscious about the mezuzah on your door, which often you tend to forget about these things. Person loses that attention that you're supposed to give to your tefillin and tzitzis and your mezuzah. But if you give attention to it, you're guaranteed you're not going to do a sin. If you have a rope that's wrapped in three twines, it's not hard. It's not easy to come apart. God surrounds him from the 3 sides of a person and saves him from chet. And those are the things that save you from chet, is your tefillin and your tzitzis and your mezuzah. Okay, we're going to continue from Tanya Remeir tomorrow, Be'ezus Hashem.
Good, thank you.
And tomorrow we'll do the regular start of 8:30. Okay, because back to...
Okay.
Okay. I got the...
Thank you.